All right, let's call to order the Timnath Works work session, Tuesday, June 11th, 2024. Melissa, would you please do a roll call?
Yes. Mayor Robert Oxmacher, Mayor Pro Tem Luke Wagner,
Here.
Councilmember Jeremy Holt,
Here.
Councilmember Bill Jenkins,
Here.
Councilmember Lisa Lake. Here.
Awesome. Thank you. Director Stone, do you want to lead us off?
Sure. Thanks for coming a little early today. We'll talk about water and sewer districts. Although the town does not have a water and sewer entity, we do have some experience. Carolyn has 14 or 16 years of experience in representing water and sewer districts. I have 14 years of working on water sewer for municipality. And Earl, who will be doing the presentation, has 35 years of service with municipal governments. 22 of those years as management of water and sewer utilities. He also served 7 years on the executive committee of the North Front Range Water Quality Planning Association. So that one kind of compares to the North Front Range MPO as far as acronyms. He also served 10 years on the board of directors of the Greeley Leveland Irrigation Company and 7 as VP, and also served 7 years on the board of directors for the Seven Lakes Reservoir. So he does have experience, a breadth of experience in this field. So with that, I'll go ahead and let him present.
Thanks, Justin. Before I get started, I wanted to thank some folks that helped put this presentation together. So I'd like to thank Scott, Lindsay Jones, Justin, and Carolyn. So this was truly a team effort in putting this presentation together. So what we'll do this evening is go through a quick introduction and overview, talk briefly about the development review process and our growth management area, and then spend some time on water and sanitation district oversight, and then talk about sanitation districts and water districts serving Timnath and our growth management area. And then we'll open it up for some questions. The purpose of the presentation tonight is give you an overview of our relationship with water and sewer districts and how that works with new developments and existing customers. Let's start with the development review process. That process really starts at the point of annexation. So when we receive an annexation petition, one of the elements that has to be included George? That wasn't on purpose, I promise. Okay. All right. So one of the requirements of an annexation petition is a willing to serve letter. And that's a letter from either the water or the sewer district where they commit to serve the new project and the development. Also, we have what are called adequate public facilities requirements. And what we identify as public facilities are public facilities that are necessary and must be constructed as part of the development. And certainly water and sanitary sewer systems are in that category. So that's governed by the land use code. We also have a robust referral agency review process. So any water and sewer district that would have to serve a future development is a referral agency. So they see all the plans and everything that we review. Ultimately, the water and sewer district has to approve the construction plans because it's their utility system. We also have the planning commission that is involved in that review process. Ultimately, town council reviews that and makes the final decision. So this is the Timnath growth management area. We're towards the southern end of that map. It extends north to just north of Cobb Lake. So A vast majority of our growth management area is undeveloped at this point. I want to talk a little bit about water and sanitation district oversight, and I'll just say that they are heavily regulated and they're extensive oversight from the federal level with the U.S. EPA, who administers the Clean Water Act of 1972 as amended, as well as the Safe Drinking Water Act. The state legislature is also involved with the oversight, and particularly with Colorado Water Quality Control Act. There's also the Water Quality Control Commission, and that's an appointed board that is the primarily responsible for water quality policy in Colorado. And then the Colorado Department of Public Health and Environment, particularly the Water Quality Control Division. They're the primary enforcement authority in the state of Colorado. They are a delegated agency from the EPA. We also have the North Front Range Water Quality Planning Association, which is the designated Section 208 planning agency under the Federal Clean Water Act. And Section 208 means it's Section 208 of the Clean Water Act. So that's, you'll see often, sometimes you talk about a 404 permit for wetlands mitigation. That's Section 404 of the Clean Water Act. The North Front Range Water Quality Planning Association oversees all sanitary sewers, facilities, and providers in Larimer and Weld counties. And one last tidbit is water and sewer districts are organized under Title 32 special districts of the Colorado Revised Statutes. They operate as quasi-municipal governmental agencies. So they're very similar to towns and cities. They have elected boards and professional staff that manages and operates those districts. We have 2 sanitation districts serving Timnath in our growth management area. So I had to put sanitation districts here first because we always talk water and sewer. I'm water and sewer, so I thought I'd give them top billing for once. So, so we have the Box Elder Sanitation District, South Fort Collins Sanitation District. And the pink area is the Box Elder Sanitation District. They cover roughly the northern 2/3 of our growth management area. South Fort Collins Sanitation District is in the blue to the south end. And I'll just point out their service areas are much larger than our growth management area. We just chose to show you what was in our GMA. Sanitation districts are governed by the Colorado Department of Public Health and Environment. They are permitted, and so the state permits the wastewater treatment plant and identifies discharge requirements based on the stream classification. So if you have a stream that is in the mountains, it's going to have much more stringent discharge requirements than if it's, say, on the lower South Platte, for example. The state monitors these through what's called daily monitoring reports. They keep track of the plant capacity, and the plant capacity is defined by either hydraulic capacity or biological chemical demand, or BOD. So those two are very critical. So they monitor the performance of the plants and some other parameters. And one thing that they look at is when a plant reaches 80% capacity, and that's either hydraulic capacity or biological capacity, they have to start planning for improvements. So as we grow and say Box Elder reaches 80% capacity, then they have to start planning for future improvements. And once they reach 95%, they have to be under construction of plant expansion. That protects Timnath in our growth area. The North Front Range Water Quality Planning Association also provides oversight. They require what's called wastewater utility plans, which are essentially master plans. So a utility does a master plan, look at the long-term planning horizon. They look at the proposed land uses, and they take that all into consideration as they plan for future plant expansion, collection system improvements, and so forth. The result is a multi-year CIP, very similar to what we do in our budget process. So they are planning out these improvements well into the future. I was on the Box Elder website this afternoon, just kind of looking around today, and they have some wonderful information there. And I'll say any one of the 5 special districts that serve our community have good websites, very good information, and I would refer people to those websites because it has very good detailed information. One last bit on sanitation districts. The North Front Range identifies an organization either as a management agency or an operating agency. Timnath is identified as a management agency because we exercise land use control. So we identify zoning and land use considerations. Sanitation districts serving Timnath are known as operating agencies. So they operate the collection system and treatment facilities. And so we have to work together to ensure that we have success. So it's basically a partnership that we have. Talk a little bit about water districts. We're blessed to have 3 water districts serving the town of Timnath. East Larimer County Water District, Fort Collins Loveland, and North Weld County Water District. Those 3 districts make up what's called tri-districts. So they jointly own and operate the Soldier Canyon filter plant, which is at the base of Soldier Canyon Dam up at Horsetooth. So all of the water that goes through there and serves those 3 entities is shared water. So essentially all customers in town and our growth management area are drinking the same water because it comes out of the same water treatment plant. So here's a map of the water districts. The green up in the northeast part of our growth management area is North Weld County. The purple is East Larimer County, and then to the south is the Fort Collins Loveland Water District. Again, the CDPHE provides the oversight to water districts. That's for permitting, plant capacity, and water quality standards. And that's done through rigorous monthly water quality monitoring. So those results are, so each jurisdiction has to test for a number of contaminants and constituents in the drinking water and report that to the state monthly. If you violate any of those standards, then that triggers an enforcement action of some sort. District policies, growth has to pay its own way, and that's particularly associated with water rights dedication requirements and infrastructure. Each of those districts have robust water resource planning and management functions. They have water dedication requirements, and they either require raw water dedication, which is like the native irrigation water rights, or a cash in lieu payment if they don't have the water, or some combination of both. I think most of them require some raw water dedication, so you can't just always pay cash in lieu. I think there are some exceptions to that rule for some of those jurisdictions, but in the end, the developer has to dedicate the raw water to the district to meet the demand of that development. Future planning, the participants participate in projects such as NISP, the Cobb Lake Regional Water Treatment Authority, There's a Northern Colorado Water Alliance, which we participate in as well, but those water districts are participants as well. So they're always looking out to the future, trying to ensure that they can have a sustainable system. With that, I'd be glad to answer any questions.
Just before we start, Aaron, do you just want us to ask questions and do we want to set? Like, is there,
Yeah, I
obviously we have a time limit for our next work session. So that's really the factor that we're looking at here.
Yeah, I think that's right. So I would say just, you can ask questions of Earl or anyone else. And
Okay.
you do probably want to be mindful of time with regards to the oil and gas conversation, but the
Okay.
time is really yours to
Okay.
open it up.
Do you guys should we start with just a couple questions apiece and just kind of go round robin until we're all out of questions?
Yeah, I have quite a few, actually. So, Robert, the mayor did ask me to ask staff to consider if we needed a water adequacy process. He said, do we need one? I don't expect an answer tonight, but he mentioned that Fort Collins does have a water adequacy process. And I did print out the ordinance that covers the water adequacy process for Fort Collins. So I'll share that with you, Earl.
Okay.
And you can share it with everybody else.
Certainly.
It's online.
Okay.
So I got that out of the way. One of the big things that's sort of concerned me since I've lived here has to do with water conservation. Given that we live in a high desert area, the cost of water has gone up considerably, and yet I see very little effort at conservation. So, for example, the metro districts commonly water the large grassy areas, and they do that without regard to whether it rained, whether it's in the process of a thunderstorm pouring down, the sprinklers still go. I'm wondering if we could, at least for metro districts and common areas in HOAs, if we couldn't add something to our land use code that says they need to be mindful of the current weather conditions or ground conditions, so that we aren't throwing water on wet ground that doesn't need it. And right on Harmony, with Timnath Lakes, with the grass there, driving down there, I've seen them watering in the middle of a thunderstorm as well. So I think there are things we could do without being too onerous. Having lived in a place where we were only allowed to water 3 days a week, and you could get fined if water was on the sidewalk or running in the street. I'm not suggesting those for residential uses, but I think your major water irrigation could be improved. And then I'll pass it on. I've got more questions, but I want to share the time.
One response to that is that might be worth asking that question of the water districts, because most of the water districts already have policies that prohibit waste. And it may be that the town may not be the best enforcement authority for that. So I think that would be the starting point, is kind of see what they already have in place and talk
Could
with
we
the
ask
water
staff to
districts.
investigate that and come back to us with a summary of that? Yeah, that'd be great.
I'll also actually echo what Bill was just saying. I grew up in an area where, one, no one had sprinkler systems built into their lawns. So you depended on rainfall and things like that. And on years that they didn't get a lot, we were restricted to watering our grass based on the number of our house. And I know we've kind of talked about it as a council before, but I feel like there's been some consensus on all of us. I'm not going to speak for all of us, but I have heard other council members also mention similar things to that of what we can do to kind of conserve. And my question is also somewhat related to that, I guess, but when we change any of our, I know we recently voted and changed, related to dimensions of trees and things that are put into new landscaping. Do we ever work with the water district to come up with ways within that of looking at how best to utilize those resources when we're requiring certain landscape requirements? Is that something that we've ever worked with them on before or could potentially work with them on in the future? And part of why I ask is I know the state just recently passed some new laws related to this as well. So I was just kind of wondering what that looks like or could look like.
That's something that we could certainly look at. I don't know, Scott, you want to chime in too?
Yeah, that's something that we could certainly look at. I don't know prior practices if we evaluated trees that are more tolerant to drought situations. I know we try good planting practices. Obviously, you want to avoid invasive species. We do have a program to xeriscape your grass strip in front of your house. So that's a program the town's implemented, and we do have a few households that are moving in that direction. It's fledgling program right now. We hope to get more of that. Obviously, we can look at our landscaping requirements to see if we can scale those back. In regards to other ways, we could look at incentives is another thing to help encourage, at least in new builds, ways to be more water wise in that regard. And obviously, the state can mandate like it did with some of the things with water conservation. So we'll be looking at that.
Great, thank you. Because I know some metro districts don't allow you to use xeriscaping in certain areas. So however, we can not necessarily require, but something related to that. I know my metro district does not allow me to do that even if I wanted to, so.
Same here with mine.
Well, and we're getting some feedback from metro districts on the challenges of the landscaping and the irrigation water. So they're aware of that situation as well. So, I think everybody's kind of pointing in that same direction about how do we do a better job of conserving water.
Great, thank you.
Yeah, so I've seen an abundance of change. One of my first jobs when I moved here from New Jersey was I ran the local True Green Chemlawn office. So I was here in 01, 02, 03 when we actually had those restrictions. They called it a 400-year drought, and you could, even days or odd days, and we were restricted at that point, and everybody hated it. And I'd be the first one to probably get upset if I can't have the greenest yard in the neighborhood. But I do believe, to Bill's point, especially with all of the new neighborhoods, there is technology. I know in new sprinkler systems, they can put on there once a certain, amount of, rain has come, it shuts it off immediately. Maybe that is required or can be required, or we can, find out from the water districts if we can require some of those things. And I've actually been on the hunt looking for new houses in the area. And there is a whole new, Lennar subdivision right over here is 100% xeriscaped in their front yards. So I don't know that is the direction to go. I don't know that driving down a street and seeing 100% gray rock in everybody's front yard is the direction we go, completely. But having that mixture of that to conserve, I think, is a good option moving forward. So I'd actually like to. I know Bill said you don't need to necessarily answer right away, but I would like to get maybe just a gut reaction or to the first question on do we match Fort Collins and have. If you want to maybe re-ask your exact question. I think the mayor had the same question as well. Yeah. What is your guys' initial thoughts, or what do we need to do in order to take a real good look at that?
Well, I did get the question. I did respond to the mayor, and our evaluation of the current systems and review processes that we have a really good relationship with our providers.
Okay.
I don't think it's necessary at this point in time to have a kind of water adequacy policy or program. That doesn't mean that we shouldn't preclude that in the future. Talked a little bit about some of the state requirements that we'll be looking at in conservation. We get into the metro districts and, you know, the rules that they have. Obviously, the town can't regulate what they do in those agreements and enforcing that. But again, our position right now is that's probably not the best time to jump into a water adequacy at this time, but that doesn't preclude us in the future to consider that.
Okay.
And I'll also add, just to remind, I think this was mentioned, but there's a state statute that says for land use approvals, you need to have sufficient water resources. So even without a sufficient policy, that's where that will serve letter comes in from the water district. So anytime someone wants a new application, they're going to come in with their own engineer and an estimate of how much their water use is, and then the water district is going to review that, hopefully before they get to that will serve letter. So without the town re-reviewing how they determine there was adequate water supply, that finding should be made before any land use application is presented to you.
So I guess more my question on that, and I don't know enough to go down a rabbit hole with this, but I know in the last couple of years, Severance has run into some issues of developments already in process and running out of water and not getting water taps. And it sounds like that development was already, you know, approved to some capacity. So how do we prevent that from happening, knowing that we are growing and we do have significant
Wellington
amount of-
had a similar problem.
Yeah. I mean, it's around us. It's from similar water districts too, if I'm not mistaken, or accessibility.
I guess because I've been in this business a long time, the water utilities that are successful today, City of Fort Collins, Loveland, Alco, it's because they've been planning and strategizing for a long time. So they had a forward vision that they were looking out there and protecting their interests and making sure that they had adequate water resources, they had adequate infrastructure to serve future growth. And not to degrade any jurisdiction that didn't do that, but that's those smaller towns that are struggling today is because they didn't do that in the past. And so they're trying to catch up to the game now when you have rapid growth rate. And quite frankly, they're just too far behind the power curve.
Yeah, and the costs are way higher.
Exactly.
So Earl, can I ask the question then? What is different about, say, those surrounding communities that had those struggles? Because I kind of read and they had infrastructure costs that kind of slowed things down. So if you were to look at, say, the town of Wellington that had their struggles and then they had to do water increases to pay for those plants, right? Are they different than Timnath? Do they have their own water district in Wellington? And then if I understand it right, the reason why they couldn't do taps out in Severance is because they had trouble accessing clean water, which was again, infrastructure. So that's at least what I've read. So could you maybe explain why we're different and why that challenge may not occur here?
The big difference is Wellington does have their own water utility. They have their own water treatment plant. And they're responsible for all of that planning that I described earlier. And it's unfortunate, but the community made some decisions years and years ago to artificially suppress rates and not generate the revenue necessary to expand their plant. And when I talk about expanding in their plant, that's the water treatment plant. There's water resources, there's other infrastructure associated with that. And they just chose not to do that. They wanted to keep rates low because they didn't want to, ruffle the feathers of their constituents. And now they're paying for it. That's why the rates went through the roof, and there's a lot of upset people up there.
So a follow-up question based on what you presented? It sounds like some of that is state regulated. Like there's a lot of things that come across, and once you hit that threshold, you need to start planning. So how did that happen in that sense? Because it feels like the way you said it is there's a lot of regulation, there's a lot of oversight, but how did a place come to that situation that was allowed not to follow those triggers in a sense?
Well, I think the growth, it was a small town. So I think growth in many ways caught them off guard by surprise, and they just simply weren't prepared for it. The state requires any water provider that serves more than 2,000 acre feet per year to develop a water conservation plan. So once your utility becomes that large, if you will, then you have to start doing water conservation measures and do lots of things. That planning trigger, as you mentioned, kicks in. So I have some experience in Wellington, but fairly limited, and I don't want to speak for them, but that's generally what happens. Small town operation, and I think growth just caught them by surprise.
So
Can I ask one more
Sure.
question? So I just want to ask the question, because we talk about these water districts and there's non-pot versus potable water. So do these water districts have the ability to provide non-pot to our community? And if not, is there a way as a town we can make non-pot maybe preferred for new development? I know the town uses non-pot. I currently live in a neighborhood where it's potable water that's going on the grass. And so I just don't know second question of that is, can we as a town look into making non-pot the preferred way to develop new, because people like grass, right? Like people we like their open spaces.
Right.
We want to be able to take dogs, we want to walk. So how can is it possible to require non-pot in a sense?
So the first part of the question, can water districts provide non-potable irrigation service? Yes, they can. In fact, Wild Wing is provided non-potable irrigation service by Northwell County Water District. The other part of that is, do they want to get into that business? Because we've had our struggles with that system up there, and we continue to have dialogue on how we can improve that system. So I think that's a bigger conversation we need to have with water districts and how willing they are to provide a dual system. In talking to Carolyn, I think we as a community could certainly require that, or at least set policy in place that strongly encourages that. And I wholeheartedly support non-potable systems. And particularly with parks and large open spaces and things like that. But I've also been involved with projects where house to house non-potable systems. So it is a feasible solution to help stretch water supplies. So that's something that we could certainly look into in more detail.
Thank you. Sorry.
The other factor would be, where are the mains located? So if they would need to have two separate entire systems for potable and non-potable. And so if you have a new development comes in and they have to put in, 3 miles of pipeline to get to their system to put in the non-potable, that's a big expense. So you can require, the installation of non-potable water, at least the water district could for sure require potable and non-potable lines, but it's really looking at where's the infrastructure so far, and is it close enough, or could they build, or drill a well that would just be non-pot? But so it's a bigger question for that water district, because they would need that infrastructure that they would then own and maintain.
So I would be remiss if I didn't mention this. I don't know that we have an answer, but I've had a couple constituents point out to me that their water pressure was really low, and I believe they were with Northwell County Water District. I don't know if there's anything we can do about that, if their water tower is separate from the town water tower. But I know pressure was a significant issue. And my understanding is that there's some spots in Harmony Club that also from time to time have low water pressure.
Right. I'm aware of that issue. It was actually the Fort Collins Loveland Water District. So
Okay.
when the temperatures started hitting 90 degrees, people started pouring a lot of water on their lawns, and particularly newly sodded lawns. So their demand went through the roof essentially.
And the
So,
tower went down.
yeah, so the
Got it.
tower goes down, plus when you have a lot of flow in a pipeline, the pressure drops. It's just it's
Yep.
physics. So
Yep.
they're working on that. They've been in conversations with us and other people that have what we call hydrant meters, and so large water users. So they're in the process of addressing that issue.
Great.
And I think they've stabilized the situation. And lights out, we're over. They've stabilized the situation. I think the pressures have gone back up. And,
Okay.
and from what
I
understand.
have one sewer question. So I've heard that there's certain areas of town, in all the presentation, it talks about quality and sizing for processing sewer, but nothing about the size of the pipes that feed different areas. And it's my understanding that we have some flow capacities that impact development in town. And I'm wondering, and I don't know all of the details, like where the limits are, but I know there are limits in certain areas. And I'm wondering if there's anything that can be done to improve that, because it constrains development in some areas of town.
Right. That is the ultimate responsibility of the sanitation district. I know that both Box Elder and South Fort Collins are in the process of implementing capital improvement projects to increase capacity. Box Elder is looking at some of their trunk mains to replace and upsize. South Fort Collins is upsizing a sewer lift station, so that's down south, and that'll be upsized and that'll increase
Oh, that's
sewage
great.
capacity.
That's great.
Yeah.
And then one last question. There was a little on your map, the pink and the blue of on the sanitation.
Okay.
There's one little pink spot, little pink square in Old Town. Is that just a mistake? It's right surrounded by blue. It just seemed odd to me.
No, not necessarily. So through the North Front Range Water Quality Planning Association and all of those processes, sanitation district identifies their service area. So in some cases, those overlap. In fact, I think Walker, if I'm not mistaken, yeah, Walker Manufacturing is in the Box Elder Sanitation District, but they are surrounded by South Fort Collins.
Okay, that must be what it is. Yeah.
Now, at one point in history, Box Elder committed to provide service there, and Fort Collins Loveland or South Fort Collins grew around there. In reality, either district can provide service to them.
Okay.
And sometimes they trade areas if one can serve it easier than the other or so forth. So.
Thank you.
Sure.
All right, thanks. And just for the record, I snuck in about 15 minutes ago. I had the opportunity to tune in on my way in. So thanks for everyone for moving this forward. Director Robinson and I had corresponded via email via my question about Fort Collins adopting a water adequacy process and do we need one? My understanding is kind of the genesis of why they decided to implement a process was they had a development come in near Budweiser that was proposing to do some unique things with water. They weren't going to have an established district service it, and it was kind of an innovative thing. And some of the concerns were, if you do this innovative thing, how do we know it's going to work? Is kind of my understanding of the genesis of that. Given that Budweiser is so close to our growth management area up north there, I'm just curious, might we see something like that here where somebody comes in and doesn't want to use an existing facility, one of the existing providers, but would want to try something different?
Well, I'm going to step out of my expertise, but I'd really find that hard to believe, given the my short time here at the town and my coordination with our providers, I think they really do an excellent job. So unless they can't provide that if they can't serve a letter, then that would probably necessitate a developer to kind of think outside the box and try to do that. But at this point in time, I don't see why we would hit that threshold. So that's why I said, it's something we should continue to look at, but I think at this point in time, I don't see that on the near-term horizon.
I guess the question is, was that to be provided by the town or was a district was in their district and decided they didn't want to go within the district, I guess? One top.
Yeah, Earl has it correct. And exactly how much of that was a choice versus, something they were forced into, I can't speak intelligently. But it is right across the highway from us. So, literally a stone's throw away.
Yeah, we could probably reach out to them and get the thoughts from the staff over there. So.
I'd appreciate it. I just don't want us to get caught off guard if.
Yep.
Thank you. That's all I have.
I have just a couple more questions.
Go ahead.
Lisa or Jeremy? Okay, sorry, I didn't want to. So one question I did read in that policy that was kind of interesting for Fort Collins was the idea of emergency as well. So, how do we as a town ensure, like in say a significant drought, wildfire, any major disaster, that we continue to have residents be able to get water, the wastewater works is that just simply us coordinating with those water districts? Is it us being good partners in that? And if so, what does that look like in the town? Like how often do you guys meet with them? Is there a review of emergency plans? Does that come up in any of your conversations?
I would say that would be us being good partners with them because they're ultimately responsible for their infrastructure, both treatment plants and their pipeline networks. In the case of a severe drought, I mean, their policies are going to dictate, water usage. Their utmost and primary responsibility is to provide safe drinking water. That is paramount to everything else. And anything that doesn't meet that definition gets curtailed. And so, a very severe drought, there's going to be no lawn watering, there's going to be no car washing, there's going to be no other activities other than providing safe drinking water. And those are the policies of the water districts based on the conditions at the time. There are severe disasters or incidents that cause other things to happen. For example, you may have some type of contamination in the water system. It might cause the water district to issue what's called boil orders, where you have to boil the water before you can consume it. In those cases, a lot of times the districts will bring in bottled water or even tanker trucks with, to provide a safe drinking water supply. So they have all of those policies and emergency response plans in place. There are cases, for example, say a wastewater treatment plant gets washed away, then that's going to be a significant problem for every user. And there would probably be a no flush order in place. And then the district would have to, scramble to provide some form of treatment capacity.
Do we go over those scenarios, Aaron? I know you're working on your red book or that type of thing. So is the town planning for those type of disasters or what that looks like for the town?
Yeah, so as with all things with emergency management, we rely pretty heavily on Larimer County. They are, in fact, our emergency management organization by agreement, by IGA with them. But they do contemplate all those things. We actually went through in November, and that was contemplated. So we went through a scenario in November, and those sorts of utilities were contemplated in that. So there's certainly consideration for those things and ongoing conversations as to how to best handle and mitigate when those things would happen.
Sorry, I just wanted to, I know, Aaron, I was just giving you a hard time. Yep. Okay, that's all the questions I have.
All right, so I understand this is mainly just a information session for us, but did you need any action items or any takeaways from this, or do you have what you need?
Yeah, so I did have a couple action items I did take note of, is get a summary of what the districts are doing as far as water conservation. Also, maybe reach out to Fort Collins about the Montava situation, just to make sure in case that comes up here that we would at least know, be prepared on that. So that's the two action items I have, so.
Can we maybe discuss non-pot in the future and how to look into that for future developments as well?
Sure.
Thank you.
Yeah, we'll start, yeah, that definitely will need to start with working with the districts and start, we coordinate with them quite a bit, especially the South Fort Collins district. So we could start those discussions.
Yeah, I'm just curious. Timnath Lakes has all the lakes that they're putting in. They also have, my understanding is they have water rights as well, which I presume they're using will ultimately use to fill up the lakes. All that grassy area that they're watering, is that non-potable, or is it potable water that they're using in Timnath Lakes? I'm thinking all that new area along Harmony. Do you know?
I'm pretty sure that those are non-potable systems. There's
That's
the,
good. That's good to know, because we have had people sort of complain about the large amount of water going on the grass there. And it looks like they have a pump house that they put there.
yeah, I'm not sure that's actually for the non-potable system, but
Uh.
honestly, I don't know enough about it to speak intelligently, so I'll have to do some research.
Yeah, it'd be nice to know.
Okay.
Thanks.
All right, are we good to move on to 2B, the oil and gas discussion? Ms. Grave, third time's the charm.
I do it.
Thank you for being ready to go the last time and being patient with us.
Okay, part 2 of oil and gas. So during the last work session in April, we provided a high-level overview of Senate Bill 19-181. We discussed the various methods used to regulate surface impacts in oil and gas facilities. And then we dove into some community comparisons. And so when we walked away from that, we kind of wanted to have a better working understanding of the county's regulations before coming back to you. And so our focus today is really to show the side by side between the county and Fort Collins. And then hopefully you all can identify a path forward for us to model our regulations from. So you will be seeing a lot of tables, but we're going to start with setbacks, and we've broken it up into 4 categories, starting with building units. And so this is the most broad and inclusive of the categories, and this includes residential, industrial, commercial, and other uses. And so the key differences between the county building unit and Fort Collins standards is really the definition that they're operating from. So Fort Collins defines a building as occupiable space, so meaning any enclosed space intended for human activities, whereas Larimer County uses the state definition, and that prescribes certain thresholds based on floor area. So for buildings that fall under those thresholds, the state setback standard would apply. And then Larimer County also includes a waiver and alternative compliance process, and I'll go through those at the end of this. Next is high occupancy buildings, so we're getting a little more specific. And this is defined as any school, nursing facility, hospital, life care institution, correctional facility, operating childcare center, or multifamily dwelling unit with 4 or more units. So here, Larimer County is more restrictive as their point of measure is from the property line as opposed to the nearest wall or platted building, but they're both at 2,000 feet. And then residential building units. So Fort Collins maintains their 2,000-foot setback as they don't distinguish between building units and residential building units. And then Larimer County allows for a reduced setback if a waiver is granted or the governing body may grant alternative compliance. And again, I'll go through that. And then for parks and trailheads, again, very, very similar, 2,000 feet. Larimer County allows alternative compliance. And then Fort Collins just is more inclusive. So more outdoor venue spaces are eligible or require this setback than the county. And so here we have all of them kind of laid out for you side by side, and you can see the county and Fort Collins are actually really, really similar. And so the main differences are that the county provides the opportunity for reduced setbacks, whereas Fort Collins, the prescribed setback distance is what it is, and it cannot be waived. And then they just vary on the definitions that they operate from. So a little bit about the waiver and alternative compliance process. So the waiver process is where all existing building unit owners and tenants explicitly agree with informed consent to the proposed oil and gas location. So everyone within that 2,000-foot setback has to agree on the location that the operator is proposing. The alternative compliance process allows the county commissioners to reduce the setback if the proposed location provides substantially equivalent protections. And this is evaluated on a really strict set of criteria and requires numerous studies. So I think it's pretty fair to say that the ability to reduce the setback is not an easy road to take. It's not likely. On to zoning. So here we have Timnath allows for oil and gas as a conditional use in 6 zoning districts. Larimer County also allows oil and gas operations in 6 zoning districts. Theirs are more concentrated around agricultural and industrial, and then Fort Collins precludes it to industrial only. So here is a map, and the red on this map represents all the zones that we currently allow oil and gas. And then the yellow represents if we wanted to turn the dial a little bit and make it a little more restrictive, the yellow would be industrial and agricultural only. And then the blue represents areas that are not currently incorporated, but that could be zoned industrial if annexed. So I'll leave that up for a second. So key takeaways. So the county and Fort Collins have very similar setback standards. The differences, again, include that the county offers pathways to reduce those setback distances. So this process or these processes require additional administration, and the governing body has to approve that alternative compliance proposal. Fort Collins standards are as stated, they can't be modified. Fort Collins uses a stricter definition of building unit, and they have more inclusions for their parks and trailhead setbacks. And then zoning is really the key difference, where Larimer County permits it as a special review in 6 zoning districts, whereas Fort Collins really permits it only in the industrial. So, I mean, there's many ways we can go about this, but we'd kind of like to start a discussion around how you would like to approach the setback standards. So would you like to kind of model it after the counties that includes pathways to reduce the setbacks? So there is the option, or we could take the Fort Collins approach, which is pretty streamlined and simple, and it doesn't provide that range. So thoughts, and I'll open that up to you guys.
Great. Thank you for that, bringing us up to speed. Let me see if I can and kind of frame this conceptually, and then maybe we'll go to questions. And then after questions, kind of discuss preferences in terms of not only which kind of philosophy might we suggest, but also specifically what the process would look like and public input and things like that. So kind of as I understand it, the state regulations changed, which kind of changed the landscape a little bit. In response to that, a number of our surrounding communities updated their standards. And as a result, specifically Fort Collins and the county now have standards that are more stringent than what we currently have. And so as a result, we kind of have this situation where it's actually easier, if you will, right now to put an oil or gas operation in Timnath as opposed to just outside Timnath. Is that a fair statement?
Theoretically, yeah. Mm-hmm.
And that we're looking at two different options here. The Larimer County option has more flexibility, but potentially is more difficult to administer. Whereas the Fort Collins model is less flexible, but would be easier to maneuver if we adopted something like that. Have I kind of framed things
Yeah, that would be correct.
accurately? Okay.
Mm-hmm.
So with that, I guess I'd start out with questions. Go ahead.
Yeah. I think more of just a historic overview. I mean, how many drilling operations do we currently have or have been requested in the last 2 to 5 years?
I believe we currently have 0.
0?
Mm-hmm.
What about requests or, I mean, it seems like we have space to do it. I don't know that anyone's gonna go drill in the middle of Harmony Club, but how many requests for drilling have we had?
0.
Now, I mean, let's clarify. There are no surface operations in town. There are significant underground operations currently operating, correct?
That is correct. Mm-hmm.
And they're under us.
Horizontal.
Yeah.
All Harmony is being. So they're underneath all of this already.
Got it.
Well,
Okay.
well, not all of Timnath Ranch. Well, I know my title has 50% mineral rights, and nobody's written me a check for extraction of my mineral rights. Well, maybe I should talk to them.
Which
Maybe
is
they
an
owe me
interesting, which is an
couple-
interesting point,
couple
that
cents.
if we adopt a, more stringent regulation, there is still the opportunity for folks to access this land. They just likely drill from Weld County and tunnel under, right?
Yeah, that's a great clarification. Yeah, what we're talking about is really just the surface
surface.
impacts, the
Got it.
wellhead
Yeah. that
and
was
the
more
pad
my-
site.
I do know about to your point, about 6 years ago, maybe, when oil prices were sky high, there was talk and there was reaction from town citizens about a proposed, no formal application, but a proposed surface drilling site in town. And, they were going to do the horizontal drilling, but then the price of oil came down and it kind of didn't make sense, but there were a lot of people concerned about that at that time. And that was, I'm thinking maybe about 6 years ago, 7.
Yeah, it's been.
But it was after I moved here, so.
It was pre my time on council because they did a moratorium prior to
Yeah.
me joining.
Anyways, I mean, oil could go up again and it could be economically viable to do it under our current situation. And I guarantee you there will be a lot of feedback from citizens about it.
Yeah, I think
And not positive.
I was asking more of those questions just to kind of figure out, but I'm glad you clarified that. So those that, it seems like those that want to drill and have the capacity will go a couple miles due east and get underneath here and get what we have anyway. So, I mean, I don't, whether we do Fort Collins, we do nothing, or we do Larimer County, I think it's going to still be underneath and not on the surface if that's historically what it is now. So I think we're more preventing, by doing this, we're preventing the opportunity for the influx, you know, per Bill's statement of, you know, gases go up and they have nowhere else to go. It's easy to come to Timnath, and we're kind of preventing that from occurring. Okay.
Mayor Pro Tem?
Can you help me understand which would supersede? Would it be zoning or setbacks? So in your map, you talked that there's Harmony, right? Which is currently could be zoned for that, but obviously there's residential houses in there. So when we're looking at how we set this policy or what we want to give feedback on, does the setback supersede zoning in that case?
So they would have to meet both the zoning and the setbacks. So first we would check the zoning. Is it permitted in the zoning district? And if it is, then we would look at the setbacks. So where does it relate in relation to the closest residential building unit,
Okay.
et cetera?
Thank you. And then in terms of like setbacks, you know, we've got some major things coming through our town, roadways, railroads, all of those items. Is it just 2,000 feet?
Point.
Measure it straight, birds fly, you know, that way. So it wouldn't, so even if there was Harmony, which is, you know, 200 feet, it would include Harmony as well in that case.
Right, yeah.
Okay.
it would.
Sorry, a bunch of questions here. So on this map, can you show me, I was trying to figure out where our schools are in this. So I know Bethke's kind of over down, not in an area that allows zoning. Can you show me where Timnath or Bethke is, or sorry, Timnath Elementary and Timnath Middle High? Okay, so that, is that Timnath Middle High right there? Yeah, right there. Okay. So they're in the red right now. Is that right? Okay. And then where's Timnath Elementary? Okay.
Red zone.
Okay. Perfect. Those were my questions. I can give my thoughts later. Thank you.
Anyone else with questions? Does anyone have initial thoughts on path forward, understanding that, you know, this will all go through potentially the land use code update process, public hearing, and, you know, we're not making decisions today, but giving staff some direction for that when they do bring up an update to us, kind of what we'd like to see as a starting point.
Yeah, I know what I'd like to see. I'd like to not have additional administrative burden on the staff for which the town gets no benefit. So if we are going to change, I'd prefer the Fort Collins approach in terms of not a lot of complexity, keep it simple. Secondly, I would also be in favor of restricting any surface operations to the industrial and agricultural zones only, not our current red zone. So more restricted areas where it could happen. Because some of those red zones are, and I know you still have the 2,000 feet and has to meet both. But I think since they can do horizontal drilling long ways, why not keep it away even farther? That's my thoughts.
Thank you. Lisa?
I would actually echo everything Bill says. I think it makes it cleaner, it makes it easier, less ambiguous. And just remembering what happened when they were thinking about putting some stuff in, which was relatively close to Bethkey at the time. I feel like industrial and agriculture just kind of fits more with what that type of building and development kind of area would look like.
I'm not a proponent of being completely against. I think there's a time and a place and for oil and gas drilling. I think there's a need for it. I don't think the middle of Timnath and residential areas is that need for it. The reason why I got my question out in the beginning is because if we're not being asked for it and it's not a place that we're doing it right now, setting a restriction without a ton of administrative burden is perfectly fine in my book. So I'm with Bill in whatever is the most direct way to do it. So there's no, I guess, avenues for loopholes and things you guys have to jump through. So I think the Fort Collins way is probably the best route to go.
Mayor Pro Tem?
I agree with the zoning for industrial and agriculture based on this map. I would actually support, I'll be different than the council, maybe a waiver process. But I definitely want clarity and definition around it, right? Like, how do we notify citizens? How do citizens get input? Can we, in those waivers, require neighborhood meetings so that citizens could come in and give their input? I kind of agree with Councilman Holt. I know there's a time and a place for it, but I think what I would be concerned about is the time and the place is in somebody's backyard without notification, without communication. So I know we do a great job of communicating out to the community, but I wouldn't want it to surprise anybody in that waiver process. So I would actually support the idea of Larimer County looking at waivers as long as there was a clearly defined community feedback process for that involved in that thing.
I was actually really struck by the Mayor Pro Tem's point that 2 of our 3 schools right now are currently in the red zone. And I mean, what's more important than the health of our kids? So that's, if nothing else, regardless of where we land here, I think that is evidence of the fact that an update of some sort is in order. I like the concept of tying it to zoning. I think that it makes sense to put operations in industrial or agricultural areas. I think when somebody looks to buy property and they see that the property is zoned residential, I think it's reasonable for them to expect that there won't be a surface operation in that zone. And so that just seems common sense to me. As we look between the Larimer County and the Fort Collins approach, I see benefits to both. I like the simplicity of the Fort Collins approach, and in that simplicity, we may choose to adopt their limits or we may choose to adopt different limits. I think that's something that might warrant further debate. The one thing I do like about the Larimer County policy is kind of the waiver by consent, where all the impacted parties agree that, hey, we're okay with this. We kind of jointly want to see this happen. I like giving that power to the landowners there. But those are kind of my thoughts, but kind of consistently what I've heard, and correct me if I'm wrong, is everyone's generally in favor of the zoning-based approach and that agriculture and industrial are the zones that would make the most sense. I've heard that simplicity and lack of kind of excessive process is desired, but also a little bit of flexibility in those cases that maybe a waiver might make sense. Maybe a little more simplified than what Larimer County talks about. You know, you mentioned their secondary process, while on paper probably isn't practical. So that's kind of what I've heard. Did anyone hear anything different? Okay. So if we ask the staff to come back to us with a proposed land use code change at some point under our current process, we'd have a first reading, and then we would have an opportunity for public comment during the public hearing process. I know we just kind of went through this a little bit with our last land use code and some critique that maybe there wasn't enough opportunity for us to hear from the public. I'm curious if, having just gone through this, what folks are thinking.
I'd like to, before it comes as a resolution for a first reading, I think it should come back in case we have comments about the specifics, and in a way that would also provide an opportunity for the public to know what was coming down the pike, as opposed to public comments on the second reading. I mean, that's where currently our system allows for public comment, and I'd just like to make people aware of the change before we get to the night that we're going to vote on it.
Any other comments?
Kind of to add to what Bill was saying, can we as a council decide to just put it not on the consent agenda, but put it as a topic for a first reading to set that hearing to, I know we can always pull it from the consent, but if we wanted to maybe just put it directly on where we can kind of talk about it and discuss it prior to the public meeting, maybe.
That might be a good way of fine tuning it if it needs any fine tuning. I mean, it may be perfect.
Yeah, I mean, our governing documents say that the public hearing occurs on second reading. Correct, Town Manager and
That is
Attorney.
correct. I would also note, it has to go through planning and zoning. We're having a work session right now. People can reach out to us through email, phone call, and public comment throughout this entire process. I would be a little reluctant to modify the process. I think it's in our code, it's in our charter. I would be reluctant to start making exceptions to our process.
Is there an opportunity to do feedback and engagement through your Timnath? Is that a possibility in this process?
We absolutely could. The other thing I would tell you is, I think the direction you're heading in is 99.99% popular. I don't know how many oil barons in town. We might have a few, but that's like, I don't think this is going to be controversial. So I don't know that this is the time to amend your fundamental processes for more input when we have a process in place and you're pursuing a non-controversial issue.
Yeah. And I mean, I do very much appreciate Bill's point and agree with it that when we deliberate on any issue, I want us to make good decisions. And sometimes just getting all that feedback at once right before you make the decision isn't always the best. I like the opportunity to chew on it for a couple of weeks. I know one of the concepts we've kind of discussed is, on some of the first readings, not do it on consent, but do kind of like a mini presentation, not we're going to ask a bunch of questions, not a full public hearing, but at least this kind of orients everyone to what's going to be discussed in 2 weeks, and then allows, those that have those that want to provide feedback to, submit stuff to us. Luke, I love your idea of leveraging the My Timnath platform. And also it is the sort of thing that, Aaron, your point is also really good. I mean, any land use code amendment goes through planning commission. So it's, published there. Maybe we can do a better job and we already do a good job. I mean, if you subscribe to the weekly emails. I mean, you really are tuned in. But, just kind of letting people know, hey, this is being considered. We do want your feedback. Here's the mechanisms to provide that.
Well, and so maybe it's more of general messaging, just reminding people, which we try to do all the time. But to your point, Mayor, you can literally enter your email address once and know about anything related to development every Monday night, coming straight to your inbox. One click opens the email. And the other thing we could push is that there are other means. You do not have to wait till second reading and only have 3 minutes. You can send a novel through public comment at any time from the convenience of your own home. There's myriad ways to make your opinion known, and it doesn't just boil down to 3 minutes right before you guys discuss and vote.
That's true, but oftentimes that feedback gets put in the packet and we get it on Thursday before the Tuesday meeting, which is exactly what happened with the last land use code amendments that the developers were concerned about and claimed that they were not adequately informed until, shortly beforehand. Obviously, they were informed well enough in advance to be able to write a letter.
Yeah,
So,
I think the key word you used there is claimed, Bill.
But the point is that the current system compresses things down to the council, where we get a lot of the feedback literally a few days before the final decision is made. And so I think I don't want to change all of the processes, but we need to maybe tweak it a little bit so we can get this feedback earlier and we can provide feedback to staff of, well, maybe could we change this or that? I just don't want to end up, there's a lot of work that the staff goes into and preparing things. And then we say, let's pull this out. That's got to be frustrating for staff too. So I don't have a perfect answer, but what we're doing presently needs a little bit of tweaking, I think.
Yeah, and I mean, there's obviously a happy medium because we also heard last time that if you make these changes, there will be way too much process that makes this onerous and we won't attract quality development. And, so I do think there's a reasonable middle ground, probably some opportunities for some improvements, but also, I mean, at the end of the day, we are an elected body, elected to make these decisions. And okay. Staff, do you have what you need from us at this point?
I believe so. I think we have consensus on the zoning, and then we will look at the setbacks and maybe craft some sort of waiver process that's a little more simplified than the county, and then bring that forward. And I guess we'll discuss when we'll bring that forward, but.
Sorry. It is Harmony that's only being drilled under. I looked at the map after we talked. So.
Yeah, because I actually,
Yeah,
I was actually kind of surprised when I looked at the title paperwork that said I own 50% of the mineral rights underneath my
And that may be part of the
roughly
reason
quarter
why
acre.
why they're not drilling under there. 'Cause
Yeah,
they
don't want to pay me.
And I'm wondering how you got that, Bill, because I was not offered anything like that when I purchased my home.
Well,
Bill will be out there with his folding table and his chair.
drill here.
You're wrong, right?
The person that owns the other 50%, I think paid $1 for the rights.
All right. Well, I think we're done. We can reconvene for our normal business at 6. Thank you, everyone.
Sure.
All right, good evening, everyone. I will call the Timnath Landing General Improvement District Board meeting for June 11th to order. Ms. Peters Garcia, will you please take the roll?
Yes, Chairperson Robert Oxmacher,
Present.
Co-Chair Luke Wagner,
Here.
Board Member Jeremy Holt,
Here.
Board Member Bill Jenkins,
Here.
Board Member Lisa Lake.
Here.
All right. Any proposed amendments to the agenda? Very well. First item is the consent agenda. Consists of a single item, approval of the December 12th, 2024 Timnath Landing GAD Board meeting minutes. At this time, is there a motion to approve the consent agenda?
I move to improve the consent agenda.
Is there a second?
Can I make a quick?
Please.
Yeah.
So on that, it says we're approving December 12th, 2024, which hasn't happened yet.
Excellent catch.
So I'm like,
And
I
that,
know it was from December of 23, but I don't know if we need to make a clerical adjustment for that.
thank you. And it does look like the actual minutes have the
Correct.
correct date listed. It was just incorrect on the agenda.
Yep.
So, we will make that correction. With that correction, consent approval has been moved. Is there a second?
Second.
All those in favor of approving the consent agenda?
Aye.
Any opposed? Consent agenda passes unanimously. We have one business item. 4A, resolution number GID 01 Series 2024, a resolution accepting the 2023 audit performed by the Autumn Group LLC. Ms. Dennis, welcome.
Thank you. Thank you. The General Improvement District audit for December 31st, 2023. We are required by law to have this audit performed by independent auditors. I wasn't going to go into a whole lot of detail on the audit itself because we're going to go over the town audit this evening, and these financials get rolled up into that town audit. But I'm here to answer any questions if you have any.
Okay, any questions? And this audit was awfully simple, wasn't it?
Yes, this is a very easy audit. Yeah.
Because no money was spent essentially, correct?
Right. Yeah.
All right, very good. No questions? Okay. This points there a motion to approve a resolution accepting the 2023 audit performed by the Adams Group LLC.
So moved.
Is there a second?
I'll second it.
Okay, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? The resolution passes unanimously. And with that, I believe we may adjourn. Moving on now, I will call to order the June 11th Timnath Town Council meeting. Ms. Peters Garcia, will you take the roll, please?
Yes, Mayor Robert Oxmacher,
Present.
Mayor Pro Tem Luke Wagner,
Here.
Councilmember Jeremy Holt,
Here.
Councilmember Bill Jenkins,
Here.
Councilmember Lisa Lake.
Here.
Everyone is present and accounted for. Councilmember Holt, any corrections to the agenda? Okay. Very good. Anyone else with any amendments? All right. Move on to item 3, public comment. I don't believe anyone has signed up. Is there anyone in the gallery that would wish to speak? All right. We will move on now to item number 4, the consent agenda, consisting of 4 items today. 4A, approval of the May 28th, 2024 Special Town Council meeting minutes. 4B, approval of the May 28th, 2024, and that should read Town Council meeting minutes. 4C, the May 31st, 2024 check register. And 4D, resolution number 47, series 2024, a resolution approving on-call contracts for traffic engineering services. Is there any request to pull an item from the consent agenda? See none. At this time, I'd entertain a motion to approve the consent agenda.
I move to approve the consent agenda.
Is there a second?
I'll second it, but I'd like to make a comment if I could.
Been moved and seconded. Is there any comments?
Yes. I would like to thank staff with regard to 4D. A very thorough evaluation, and I really appreciate the fact that you've got multiple contractors identified. So great job.
Yeah, I'll just pass it to my staff, Kim, in the back.
All right. Thank you, Kim. Any other comments? Okay. All those in favor of approving consent agenda signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Consent agenda passes unanimously. We'll move on to item 5, mayor and council reports. Council members, anything?
Yeah, I attended the NFR MPO recently, and it's noteworthy that they approved for Greeley another like $1 million added to the budget for road improvements out there. So I'm looking forward to working with Justin to identify some funds that we might qualify for. So maybe they could spend some of the federal dollars here in Timnath.
Great. Thank you, Councilmember Jenkins. Appreciate your service on that committee and the continual updates.
Could I add a little bit? Sorry.
Mr. Holt.
I just want to thank those that showed up to the ice cream social. I don't know what it is about this town, but anytime we throw an event, we have the craziest weather known to man, and have the most amazing staff that somehow puts up with it every single time. So kudos to everyone that came out. There was a ton of people. And kudos to the staff for always taking what they have and making the best of it. So good job.
Yeah, and also I appreciated the messaging that went out with respect to the weather and instructions to folks. So that was very helpful. I just have 3 updates. The first is over the weekend, I attended the ribbon cutting for the Wilder development, which is in Timnath Ranch, just kind of outside what'll be the Peanut Park there. And that was just a great event. It was the first event hosted by our brand new Timnath Chamber of Commerce. So that was fun to see that get off the ground, and hoping that they can continue to expand their membership. Next Thursday, we have the Future of Old Town brainstorming session at the Presbyterian Church in Old Town. That's at 6:30. Please check out the website and register in advance for that so that we can make sure that we have proper accommodations. But really looking forward to that, including the 4 council members, or 4 of us that will be participating in that. And then finally, I wanted to note that council received a letter from the Together for Timnath group entitled Community Priorities and Recommendations for the Town of Timnath. I just really wanted to thank them for the time and thought that went into that document. I know all of council has received that, and we'll be reviewing that. Of course, with the Future of Old Town brainstorming session coming up, and some other leadership events going on, I think we'll have a chance to digest that. But just really appreciated the positive communication and the solutions that were thrown out there for consideration. Anything else from council members? All right, then we can move on to our next business item, which is item 6A, resolution number 48, series 2024, a resolution accepting the 2023 audit performed by the Adams Group. Ms. Dennis.
Good evening again, Mayor and council members. I'm Bonnie Dennis, the County Manager, and I have a short presentation to talk to you about the 2023 Annual Comprehensive Financial Report. Maybe not. Okay. Okay, so I am going to present the financial report and some details, and then I'm going to turn it over to Kevin Kimball, who is the Adams Group partner who worked on our audit. No, if you can advance the next slide. Okay, so generally, the audit report is a little bit different than what you've seen in the past. This year, we are doing this annual comprehensive financial report that's in alignment with the Government Finance Officers Association in order to receive the award for excellence. And basically what that is that this is the highest award that a financial report can receive, and it's gone through a pretty rigorous process through the GFOA to make sure that the report is not only accurate and technically correct, but also that it's the most transparent. So there's some new things that you're going to see in the ACFR, and that is going to be the letter transmittal. And this basically describes the town's where we have been going and where we're seeing ourselves in the future in a financial perspective. The things that are consistent from prior year would be the management discussion and analysis, and that's just taking it from this financial report from 2023 and looking backwards in comparison to the prior year. Then we also had the financial schedules and the footnotes, which is the government wides, the audit opinion, and everything that goes in the financial section. And then we have the other required supplemental information, which is your budgetary schedules and some other various schedules that we've included. And then there's another component that's new, and that's the statistical section, and that includes 10 years comparison of all the town's indicators. It shows the financials for the past 10 years. It shows our principal employers for 10 years. This section is actually really a great look and see where we have gone in the past. So looking at a couple of financial highlights, the statement of net position, which is basically the balance sheet, is at the end of December 31, 2023, we had a net position of 81.6 million. That is an increase of 14.4 million or 21% over 2022. The majority of that is related to our total assets of 153.9. And within that total assets, 53% of that is actual capital assets like infrastructure, buildings, vehicles, and so forth. We also have total liabilities, and that's 63.3 million. And related to that is 54.6 million related to debt. And then we also have the net pension liabilities that we have to report on, 4.3 million. The statement of activities is basically the profit and loss statement, and that is at the end of December 31st, 2023, we had revenues of 36.3 million. This is an increase of 3.4 million or 10% over the prior year. The majority of that is related to investment earnings. We've had 2 million in this last year that we earned just from basically interest income. Then we also had some increases in pretty much all of the other revenue lines. We did have some additional expenses over prior year. We had an increase of 2.6 million or 13%, which ended the year at 21.9 million in expenses. And the majority of that is really related to the operating costs of the new PD building, as well as new positions, additional capital projects, and so forth. Fund balances and the classifications between those. So when we look at the general fund specifically, or the TDA fund, the general fund had 44.2 million in just a fund balance. This is your equity. But that 44.2 million is broken down into categories of restricted, committed, assigned, and unassigned. And the restricted is basically for, you can only use those funds for very specific things that are tied to intergovernmental agreements, or if it's tied to legislation of some sort. Committed is through a formal action by town council. And then we have for assigned, which is for very specific or designated purposes. and unassigned, which is unrestricted but is used at the town's discretion. So other key highlights, we have a new pronouncement, which is the GASB statement number 96, and that is related to subscription-based information technology arrangements, which is also known as SPITAs. These are related to any IT-related subscriptions that are material in nature and are covered for more than 1 year. And we did have one significant SPITA arrangement that actually we just added last year. So we did not have to do any prior period adjustments. We were able to add that, and that was related to the police vehicles and the subscriptions for the cameras in the cars. That was the only pronouncement that we had to add this year. Other notable items is that we did present this to the Finance Committee on May 13th, and we did incorporate changes that they had, and we went through this document and the financials in quite a bit of great detail. And then lastly, we did go, this is the first year that we're going to go after that GFOA award. And it does take some time because it goes through multiple channels as a review process. So we'll hopefully find out more about that within 6 to 9 months. Okay, with that, I'm going to turn it over to Kevin, who is going to talk about a little bit more the audit and the governance letters.
Thank you. I'm a little tall, so if I'm not hitting this, hopefully my voice is loud enough. Kevin Kimball, thank you for the introduction. Pleasure to be in front of you guys. And so Bonnie went at a high level through the financial statements themselves. I'm just going to talk about obviously our audit opinion, which is at the front of that thick packet that Bonnie and Lisa worked hard to put together this year. And then our required communication to governance or town council. That's our other letter that we issued as a part of the 2023 audit. Specific to the audit opinion, and this is both for the town and the Timnath GID that was issued separately, but rolls into the financial statements. Both of those received an unmodified or a clean opinion. This is the cleanest opinion that we as independent auditors can issue for, any entity that we perform an audit over. So kudos to council and management. And what also is outlined in those audit opinions is a couple different sections: responsibilities that we have as independent auditors for this type of engagement, obviously designing tests and procedures to gain reasonable assurance that those financial statements are not materially misstated. And then it also goes through the responsibilities of management during an audit. So Lisa, Bonnie's team, obviously other departments within the town. And so if you ever have questions about what's involved in an audit, those 2 paragraphs do a really good job summarizing it. As Bonnie alluded to, because the town is doing a full annual comprehensive financial report, there are a couple additional paragraphs in our audit opinion compared to what you guys may have seen in previous years looking at audits for the town. And really those paragraphs are alluding to limited procedures that we're required to perform over some of that other information. That statistical 10-year look back that Bonnie alluded to that's now included in that body of the financial statements. And so those are some of the key changes from previous years. And it just outlines, the type of work or an in relation to opinion that we provide over that additional information that's included this year. And then as far as the governance letter is concerned, what this letter is required to have are key significant audit communications to governance. And so some of the significant audit matters this year: anytime a new accounting pronouncement is adopted, it's disclosed in that letter. And Bonnie went through it. That new GASB statement number 96, which essentially takes paying for subscription-based information technology agreements, and it just goes out as an expense. Now you see that long-term portion as an asset and a liability on the face of the balance sheet for the government-wide statements. And that's the real change. Obviously, there's still cash outflows, but it's showing that long-term impact of entering into an agreement that has a non-cancelable period for greater than 12 months. And so that was the main change in adopting that standard. Other key significant audit matters: inherently, all these financial statements, any set of financial statements, they have estimates, and some estimates are more significant than others. And so in that letter, some of the estimates that are key to the town's financial statements would be the net pension and other post-employment benefit liabilities. Obviously, the town is a participant of a group defined benefit plan, and based off of actuarial studies and projections, the town's proportionate share of what is an asset, what is a liability for the overall local government plan. That changes each year, and inherently that's an estimate. That's obviously one of the key estimates that hits the financial statements. Another one would be depreciation expense, how the town chooses to amortize depreciation to certain types of assets. Vehicles could be 5 years, buildings may be 20, certain infrastructure may be longer than others. And so obviously that inherently impacts the financial statements as an estimate. Other, key information that's included in that letter, if we had any difficulties with management, disagreements with management during the course of the audit, it would be disclosed in that letter. Happy to report that we had none of that. Bonnie, Lisa, the whole team that we work with upstairs are always ready for us. They make our lives easy from an audit standpoint, and it's a pretty efficient process from our side of the coin. So just want to thank you guys for that. And that's been the case in our years working with the town. Outside of that, if we had any significant control recommendations, they'd be disclosed within that letter. And we had nothing as far as a control finding or significant recommendations that we felt needed to be included in that letter. Overall, our tests of town controls didn't come up with any red flags, for lack of a better way to say it. But if we did, they would be included in that letter. And so those are obviously the opinion, and then our required communication, which is in that second letter. I'm happy to answer any questions about the audit, the opinion, the letter that I went through, if council has any.
Thank you, Mr. Kimball. Thank you, Ms. Dennis. Council, any questions? All right.
Thank you for the time.
Thank you. With that, I would entertain a motion to adopt resolution number 48, series 2024, a resolution accepting the 2023 audit performed by the Adams Group.
I have a motion to approve resolution number 48, series 2024, resolution accepting the 2023 audit performed by the Adams Group.
Is there a second?
Second.
All right. Seconded by Mayor Pro Tem. Council, any discussion?
Yeah, go ahead, Lisa, since I stole it.
I just want to thank our staff again and for all the people who went through the whole process of that. I know the whole budgeting and all of that takes up a huge chunk of the year. So just a huge thank you to all of the staff who are involved in this. And it's always great to hear that all of your financials are in order. So thank you.
Yeah, I just want to thank Lisa and Bonnie and the entire finance department. So I've been on the finance committee, going on 4 or 5 years now, and this report has come a long ways, and it's amazing. And pointing out the statistical section this year, I really thought that was amazing. So thank you guys. I would encourage residents to go and look in there. It's something that I feel like I've never seen before, and it was amazing. So I really appreciate that updates, and I appreciate the hard work you guys did, because it did require us to go back, pull the information, or not us, but the finance department to go back and pull that, which does require a lot of work. So I definitely encourage residents to look at it. I want to thank the finance committee, Councilman Holt. It was a great work session. There was a lot of great feedback, and so I know it's not everybody's favorite thing to do is read an audit, but I think it's amazing that we've got a good group of people that actually take the time to do it. So thank you again, Bonnie. Thank you, Lisa.
Yeah, I'd like to echo Luke's statements and thank staff. I've looked at a lot of audits in the past in the commercial world, corporate world, and this is really first class. And you're definitely in the running for that award of excellence. And it was very readable and very understandable. So thank you.
I will absolutely echo those comments. I'm sorry, go ahead, Jeremy. I didn't mean to.
You're good. Keep going.
I will absolutely echo those comments. If someone were to come to me, say I'm new to town and I want to know about town government and what's going on, this is the perfect document to point them to and just get that snapshot. Very digestible. very understandable. Obviously, I'm pleased to hear that we're in good shape and following the rules. There were a couple of things that, although I knew them, as I read them, came to my mind again, just for us to continue to be aware of. First of all, as it comes to sales tax, sales tax has not been raised in 10 years for any reason. Our 75% of our sales tax revenue comes from 3 retailers, which is a bit of a liability for us, right? But also the report pointed out that we expect some more diversification in that in the near future with some of the recent annexations and whatnot. So I was kind of encouraged to hear that. The other thing that caught my attention is property tax and the mill levy, and exactly how little money comes to the town as a result of that. And by way of comparison, property taxes 8 times what comes to the town, 8 times that amount is going to the school district, right? 3.5 times of what comes to us goes to the county. And then depends on which metro district you're in, somewhere between 3% or 3 times and 8 times what comes to the town is going to your metro district. So just that awareness of, how little money is coming to the town. And, despite having one of the lowest property or lowest sales tax rates in the area and, very little property tax money coming to us, the fact that we're in such good shape financially, really is encouraging and a tribute to, how well we are managing those resources. So thank you all.
Yeah, I'm just I'll continue to wave the staff flag. I think the best part of being in that meeting, not only, going through this entire process, but hearing from the auditors how easy it was to deal with staff. There was no hidden agenda. There was no, troubles. It was very straightforward. And I think you've made the exact comment. They're ready for us and they make it easy. So thank you guys for what you do.
Any more comments? All right. With that, all those in favor of approving Resolution 48 Series 2024, a resolution accepting the 2023 audit performed by Adams Group, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? 6A passes unanimously. Anything else from council? With that, we'll stand adjourned.